sorry about that. I accidentally bumped the button to stop recording. It was before he was actually... They developed him. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, they bothered having a description of him, of his character, and you know, that was a good thing. They developed him, and then there's Summer. She was raised rich her whole life, and you know, again, despite being in a place that was perfectly safe, risked her life to go out and help others. Scott as well. And, you know, they developed the characters. They developed the characters in RPM, and you know, that's part of why it's so good, because they let you get to know the characters so that you could sympathize with them. And they didn't quite do the same thing in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because they did essentially cut to the chase in the first episode. But you did kind of get to know who each of the characters were. You got to know who Zach Taylor was, who Trini Kwan was, who Billy Cranston was, who Jason Lee Scott was, who Tommy Oliver was, who Kimberly Ann Hart was. You got to know all of them after a while, and, you know, it could have been better. It could have been made better. Everything can be made better, but the weird thing is that this CGI... I'm just going off on a tangent here. Excuse me. The CGI in Dino Charge, excuse me again, doesn't look as good as the suits and animatronics and whatever that they used 20 years ago when they made Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. And, you know, I don't know if that's a Saban thing. I don't know if that might be like a Toei thing, because I did see some not great effects in the Gokaiger opening. So I don't know. I don't really know whose fault that is. You know, when your CGI is starting to border on Sharktopus level of bad, I'm not saying this is in any way comparable to Sharktopus. It's not. It's miles and miles ahead of it. It is leagues better than Sharktopus, let me tell you that. Leagues better than freaking Sharknado. But, you know, it can be better, and it has been better, and that's the thing. Once something better has been made, you either gotta keep doing the thing that made it better, or you've got to do something else. Like, you've got to come up with a different approach, because this kind of I wouldn't exactly say slapdash approach. Um, to character development isn't quite isn't quite as good as it should be. You know, I mean, the good thing is that they're actually using out-of-suit fighting, which was something that MMPR didn't do very much, which is something that's got above that. They're actually useful outside the suit. I mean, in a fight per se. That was kind of funny, Jason Lee Scott, peak human condition, and can't take on monsters that are made out of clay. But yeah, it's good. Dino Charge is essentially good. It isn't on par with RPM quite. I would like it if like, when they go over to Dino Supercharge, or like when they adapt Talker, that they go whole hog with the character development. Maybe stop airing it on Nickelodeon. Maybe move it over to Saban's own channel, Hold the Vortex. Maybe get back some of the good development that they had in RPM and other series. That would be good. In fact, that's really the main issue. That I can't remember who any of these people are. It's like, okay, I know Tyler, Shelby, and Coda. And that's just off the top of my head right now. There are Tyler, Shelby, Coda, the Keeper, and Fury. I think he is the guy with the sword and the spikes on him. The rest of them are kind of... I guess that's the big issue. Is that there's nothing that really stands out to me. It's like there's nothing quite as punchy and unique and memorable as Zordon, Rita Repulsa, Lord Zed. Venjix. I mean, as best I can tell, the doctor girl that I can't remember her name, which is that's great job there, writers. I think she's trying to be like Dr. K. Or at least I hope she is, because if not, she needs to go back to acting school. Because her lines come off as kind of flat. Really, I think the one with the most personality is the guy who's actually supposed to be... Personality to his voice, however, is the guy who's supposed to be from New Zealand. Who I can't remember his name right now. Ranger Black. Go with that. And, that's the thing. I should really stop saying that's the thing. Yeah, the problem is that, I mean, granted, at the beginning of RPM, I had no idea who any of the characters were, but that was because they hadn't told us their names. I mean, Dylan and Ziggy. Those are the only two characters we knew the names of. But I can remember. Jason, Trini, Billy, Zach, Kimberly, Jason. I can remember those six from having watched the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 5 years ago. I can remember Scott, Flynn, Summer, Ziggy, Dylan, Gemma, Dr. K. I can remember those 8 from having watched RPM 6 years ago. But having just watched this episode, I can't remember more than 3 characters' names. And, not to diss on New Zealand or anything, because I know some people from there. They're pretty good. And my all-time favorite season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, not I just called the whole series Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. My all-time favorite series, RPM, was produced in New Zealand. Why are they still filming in New Zealand? Is it cheaper there? Because, Disney doing it, okay, fine. They can do whatever they want. They're Disney. Why did Saban keep doing it? Again, not to diss on New Zealand or anything, but it doesn't make sense. Is it that it is just cheaper to film there? Is that why? Because there were a handful of TV series in the 90s too that were filmed in Canada that were actually supposed to be set in the US. Again, I don't know if this is supposed to be set in the US. I would assume so, since everybody except for one guy, no, 2 guys, I forgot about Coda. Everybody except for 2 people sounds like they're supposed to be from the Midwest US. Although they're obviously not hiding that it's New Zealand. I wouldn't exactly say iconic. I think since the most prominent, well, actually, yeah, iconic, Lord of the Rings. Actually, you know what? They could be shooting in Ireland for all I know. Well, because they've got some really lush landscapes there too. Well, who knows? Bottom line, it's good. Not quite as good as it could be, but it's good. Here's hoping that when they actually do reveal who the Silver Ranger is supposed to be, it's somebody we all know, like maybe Austin St. John, maybe Jason David Frank, maybe David Yost, or maybe one of the Dino Thunder Rangers. Now, that would be fun. That would be pretty cool. Of course, they would have to get Jason David Frank back if it was the Dino Thunder Rangers, because you know what, I just just adapt the whatever the Japanese crossover movie between Zyuranger, or whatever Dino Thunder's Japanese counterpart, and Kyoryuger is. Just adapt that movie. I mean, that would be awesome. You'd have a reunion of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, a reunion of the Dino Thunder Rangers, after a period of 20 and 10 years, 21 and 10 years respectively, I guess. This might be a little longer for MMPR, and it's about 20 and 10 years. And meeting up with the new Dino Rangers. That would be awesome. Just get the entire cast back. Although, granted, considering that Saban wasn't willing to get more than like five Rangers, 5 of the big name Rangers from. Actually, the only Ranger I really recognized was Jason David Frank in Super Mega Force. And the guy from Time Force, but I doubt that Saban would be willing to get back 11 people and fly them out to New Zealand so that they could shoot the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers / Dino Thunder / Dino Charge movie. Awesome as that would be. It'd be nice. It'd be nice if they would make that movie. It'd be nice if they would stop sticking 2 Sentai series into one. Because their Dino Supercharge is gonna be a combination of Kyoryuger and Taker. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sort of like how Megaforce was a combination of Goseiger and Gokaiger. I mean, granted, I have no idea if any of those are any good. I mean, from what I hear, Gokaiger is good and Taker is good. Go-Onger, speaking of the ones with Go in the name, Go-Onger, I've read the premise of Go-Onger, and it does not sound great. I mean, it sounds utterly repulsive to me. It's unless they wrote it very well and developed it correctly, it's kind of a high premise, a high concept idea. Go-Onger was whatever. Go-Onger is like a high concept idea that could easily fall flat on its face if it isn't done properly, and considering how television usually doesn't do things properly, I wouldn't necessarily want to get any hopes up about that. It's just the whole thing seems like there's supposed to be a story that comes before the story, It's like how a lot of Final Fantasy games start out. Like there's a more interesting story that comes before the story that you're about to play. And it would be nice if you were able to play that story instead of the one you're playing now. Sort of like how in Final Fantasy III, where they had that whole conflict of the dark versus light thing, where the users of the light tried to take over the world, That sounds like a much more interesting game than what they actually made, which was just boring old light versus dark. And you only really found out about the dark versus light thing with the dark, with the users of the dark actually being the heroes of the story through text dumps. Or like how I was talking about in Chronicles of a Dark Lord, where the whole, that whole year they skipped at the beginning of War of the Abyss could have been at least as interesting as the entirety of the game War of the Abyss was. And about how, the criticism about them doing that in Tides of Fate is a little less major, because I know they couldn't really do what they wanted with that engine. But for like, if you're talking about Square Enix or Saban or Toei, who, from as best I can tell, owns about half of Japan, or at least about half of Japan's popular culture, the rights to it and stuff, because like they've got plenty of things. They've got Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, they've got Dragon Ball, which is a license to print money all on its own, and they've got One Piece, which is again a license to print money. And they probably got a bunch of other stuff that I don't know about. And I'm not going to be criticizing something that I haven't watched. Going back to the thing where I was talking about Go-Onger. I'm just putting my 2 cents out there that sounds like a concept that if done improperly would easily fail. Kind of like how Super Mega Force kind of failed. It had a decent concept, but it wasn't implemented properly. Kind of like how a lot of stories go, I guess, where a little bit of tweaking would have made it all the more enjoyable. Well, I've already talked for well over the running time of the actual show, so I might as well wrap it up here and say see you next week with more Power Rangers. Dino Charge!